Hey, what's up, universe? It's 5:09 p.m. on Wednesday, August 9th, 2023. So I've spent a ridiculous amount of time on TikTok. I actually didn't get a whole lot of sleep. First time, I've never spent so much time on a social media platform just checking out all of the crap that came across my feed. And the reason I allowed myself to do that was because I found it fascinating. You know, back in 2006, when I was starting to get into things and start to watch my own videos and my own sources of information that I came across, there were and weren't a whole lot of people talking about it. It certainly didn't seem to be something that was nearly as widely accepted or talked about, or something that people were connecting with. And it's just a radically different environment like in 2023 than it was in 2006, and even 2009 and 2014, that 5-year span when I was really researching the news. And it's interesting because my belief, what appears to be the reason that there's more connection and more awareness around this type of corruption, this systematic, basically oppression, all of the different things that make up this power infrastructure, is because the generation behind me, me being a Gen X person, just right on the cusp there, the millennials and after that, and after, that's what they came of age, in that, they grew up with that. They are directly experiencing that in a way that's a little bit different than the Gen X, our generation, my generation, is experiencing it or has experienced it, and then definitely different in a way than what previous generations experienced it. So there's definitely a blooming of awareness from the younger generation. And I will say too, doing inner work and the like when I went to the Journey Within in 2021, when I went to Costa Rica in March, when I went to Fiji in 2019, what gave me hope for the future, honestly, because back in, when 9/11 happened, then all the research that I did in 2006, 2007, all that time going into 2014, I became extremely cynical towards our species, because it just didn't seem like people were like the level of awareness around like the facts of these power structures and the corruption and like the oppression and the design, like it's intentional, just wasn't. It was frustrating. It was very frustrating for me to experience. So going to these things, like I was just saying, Fiji, Costa Rica, the Journey Within in Colorado, the younger generation was always present at those events, understanding the importance of inner work, understanding the influence and all of that, the power structure, the design of it. They were aware, of these things. So the first way to, deal with a problem is to acknowledge that there's a problem. And that was one of my major frustrations when I started to become aware of things, is that there was just a complete lack of acknowledgement from the majority of the population. And it's interesting now to witness this to me it's a very dramatic shift, having not been, paying attention to this stuff, and just focusing on my own inner work, and just deciding to kind of not pay attention to the world stage for the last 9 years or 10 years or so, a lot has changed, and it is very, very interesting. So just through some of the stuff that I became aware of, I was like, oh, look, like people are talking about some of the stuff that I was already talking about. And so I almost feel a little bit behind, because there's enough people talking about this stuff, where the things I've been talking about in my last few videos, some viewers might be like, yeah, duh. I mean, I'll be like, okay, cool. So some of the things that are really interesting that I came across were like, to get into kind of like the geopolitical stuff, right? And this is something I didn't know. So there's a U.S. State Representative Jeff Jackson of North Carolina, and I came across a couple of his TikToks, and then I verified what he was saying, online. And there are a number of high-ranking military officials that are retiring. One of them already retired, like July 10th, and then a few, like 3 or 4 more is set to retire within the next couple of months, and their replacements are not being installed because there's a U.S. Senator, I think it's Tommy Tuberville, he's a Republican from Alabama, and I don't know exactly how this works, but I think it's because if like one senator abstains from voting, if I understand it right, then they can't install these military leader replacements, right? So there's a Marine general, General David Berger, I believe, on July 10th or thereabouts, of the U.S. Marine Corps stepped down or retired. And so this is the first time in 100 years that the U.S. Marine Corps does not have an installed leader of that branch of the military. That's a little crazy to me, just that alone. Then there's the Chief of Staff, General James McConville, I believe, of the U.S. Army, who's set to retire. And I believe some of these are going to have like temporary replacements, but not like officially installed replacements. As far as I know, the Marine Corps, they don't have like even a temporary one. I believe General James of the U.S. Army, I think they're handing some of the command over to the number 2, and I didn't write down his name. There's 3 naval admirals, as far as I'm aware, that are set to retire as well within the next few months. And again, their replacements aren't being installed. There's people that could take over, like there's people that could step into these leadership positions, but they're being blocked. And I believe, and I could be wrong on this because I don't know the whole infrastructure. I don't know if this is accurate, but I believe it's like there's an admiral, I think, of the Naval Sea Systems, and then another admiral of the Naval Installations, and then an admiral of the Naval Academy. I think those are the 3 that are set to retire. That's like 4 or 5 like high-ranking, general admirals that are no longer present in what I would assume to be very critical leadership positions within our military. That seems like that's a big deal. And given, all of the stuff that's going on in the world, it seems like the timing doesn't seem great, you know what I mean? And then to kind of play into that a little bit, like with Africa, right? I was just talking about Africa just because of what I was talking about with Behold the Pale Horse, and from the article that I found, I had no idea that Niger, this is like in the last 5 to 7 days, and I think other countries within Africa have started to make deals with Russia, and they're kicking out France and the US. And so like in Niger alone, like that's where we source some uranium. There's a pipeline, an oil pipeline that's almost done to being completed. That was going to be a big deal. And then it seemed like there was some other thing. So like Europe was going to be getting some energy through that pipeline. Obviously, oil was going to be a big deal. And then they nationalized the gold mines too. So private, Western private companies that were mining, they're like, nope, like this is a nationalized thing. So now the gold is under like the control of those local governments. And it's not just Niger. Like there's other, like I said, other countries in Africa that are basically going the same route. And you can find, there's a interesting article on its name, the title of it. And this was published, I think, like 4 days ago. It's on geopoliticaleconomy.com, and it's US/France threaten intervention in resource-rich Niger, fears of war in West Africa. And with Niger, the uranium, that's where we source some of our uranium for the nuclear power plants here in the United States. And I looked it up, and we get about 18% of our national energy is generated from nuclear power plants. And so for some reason that were to be disrupted, that's kind of a big deal, which may also play a role somewhat, perhaps, or I'm not exactly for sure. But then there's the Texas energy price surge, which happened, I can't remember if it was this past weekend or it was within the last week. I think it was over this past weekend, like 800% energy price increase. What? Like, what's going on with that? And then you got the whole thing with the, on another just front, you've got things with the with Hollywood going on. You've got the Writers and Actors Guild, and then you've got all of this stuff coming out, like The Sound of Freedom. You've got, obviously the stuff with AI, but you've got all this weird shit coming out, like with the music industry, the entertainment industry, the underbelly of that, which I was aware of back, again, when I was doing the research back in 2007, 2006, there was a lot coming in around that, that I was becoming aware of. So that's not shocking to me. The fact that it's at the level of public awareness that it is now, and the things that like the Disney CEO are saying, it's like they are absolutely provoking civil unrest. Like the only logical explanation is that like they want to have civil unrest. It's almost like, what is going on when prices are going up, inflation is our currency is in trouble, our energy is in trouble. We have people being very much aware of the oppression by design. We have CEOs that are making, and everybody's known this, ridiculous amounts of money. There's the whole alien thing coming out, and everywhere you look, and then before I even spent this ridiculous amount of time on TikTok, it was showing up in the funny TikToks that my youngest son would show me, right? There's basically, and I saw this too when I was going through, but people are like, you've got the government being like, hey, aliens, and like the general population is like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't give a shit about aliens. Like, the first thing everybody talks about in all of these TikToks is like, is it going to help me pay my rent? That's like the first thing they talk about. And then it's about, is it going to lower food prices? So anytime in history where there's been massive social unrest, or even the R word, revolution, it is around the basic needs of the people in the society. We all need food, water, and shelter. We need the basics, man, and these things are like threatened. And then you've got stuff like the Disney CEO basically stating that they're going to just keep this going on. They're not going to negotiate with these sorry, my brain's probably not quite coherent because I've been up for a long time. is it the Writers Guild and Actors Guild, I think, right? Or I forget, like, sorry, I'm going to just go with that, and if that's the wrong word, then I apologize. But basically saying that he's going to, just for as long as it takes, when people like lose their homes, like blatantly stating he doesn't care, they don't care, like, you know, and the amount of, like, the kind of energy that's coming out, like, as a response to that, that is a hey, what's up, Mac? There's a real energy of unrest that is present with that, and it's pretty, I don't know, that's pretty intense. And then just to kind of push that a little bit further, like with AI, I ran into this because I didn't know this either, but I found a TikTok where somebody's like, you're not going to believe this. Like, there's a company out there called Fable, and they took South Park as an example. And basically what this platform does is, like, you can create an entire South Park episode. You can include yourself in the South Park episode, and all you need to do is basically give it a prompt, right? Kind of describe what you want the episode to be about, and it will create the full freaking episode. The dialogue, the characters, like everything they say, the movement, the full episode, like the entire South Park world generated. And they're like, this was just a proof of concept. Like, you know, we're not going to do any more South Park stuff because we don't own the intellectual property. And they already have like 7 different shows of their own that they're going to be creating, right? So, like, that totally ties into the whole what's going on in Hollywood and what's going on with the writers and the actors. And so it's really interesting because there's people that are privy to the underbelly of Hollywood, like Mel Gibson and Mark Wahlberg and some other people, you know, that are starting to come out, and they are just deciding to be like, we're going to start talking about this stuff. Like, we don't really care about what the repercussions are because now it's time to talk the truth. And just knowing what I've known from the history of the stuff that I've researched, like I said, the amount of darkness and crazy shit that happens in Hollywood will be more than, like, astonishing to the general public. It'll be the kind of thing that will absolutely inspire a very profound reaction. You know, with the whole human trafficking and other types of things, there's a lot there. And then, man, there was something else that I was gonna, like, tie into with that. Sorry, my brain's kind of foggy with that. I ran into another interesting thing, just to kind of go into another little tangent. There's on TikTok, Brown Family Farms in Indiana. There's a really interesting experience where a guy, he posted on TikTok and like a number of videos, but of his experience where he's a local farmer, right? And farming is not cheap, so you've got to take out loans, and it's, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he's a local farmer, right? So he's not one of these big, like, conglomerates. And the IRS went back to 2020 and redid his taxes without him knowing it, and took all of his money out of his account and then some. He had a nice chunk of change one night, and then the next day he had negative, like, a massive amount of money. Nothing was communicated to him, nothing was documented, nowhere, nothing in his bank app, no emails, no letters in the mail, no phone calls, nothing, just complete, hey, now you're massively in the hole because the IRS decided to go back and redo his 2020 taxes for whatever reason. And so just recently, like, I don't remember when this video was posted, could have been today or yesterday, whatever, but he had to go through so much crap. He's getting, supposedly, he should be getting his money back, but he had to go through so many, like, all of this madness for a few days without anybody being able to tell him anything. And he believes, and I believe this, that the only reason he's actually getting his money back is because the amount of visibility that his posts were getting, like the social pressure, right? The visibility that it was creating. Otherwise, you know, this, like, who's going to say anything, right? So what? Like, you know? So I find that to be an interesting kind of set of events along this backdrop of things that are happening. Sorry, I'm just reading Mac's thing. Yeah, well, I agree. You know, I definitely view AI as a tool to extend creativity, except for what was really, I mean, I agree with that. And at the same time, like, Peter Haas in 2017 did a TEDx talk, and I love one of the lines from his TEDx talk, because he was talking about the real reason to, you know, fear AI. And this wasn't his main point, but this always sticks in my head. The economic incentive to use artificial intelligence will always drive, like, there will always be that economic incentive, because the base price of energy will always be cheaper than human labor. And to the ability to create content fast and quick, and just the quality is going to just, like what Disney CEO said. He's like, whatever, man. He's like, you guys will have to lose your houses. Like, so laissez-faire, just whatever. Like, we don't care how it's impacting people. And that kind of an attitude, I agree with you. It should be a tool to extend human creativity. The way that the people in power seem to be relating to this is that it is a replacement. Oh, which I will also say, this does remind me, as a completely different thing, whole different topic, but it is something, it's related, and it's something I've been thinking about. So through scrolling through TikTok a lot, I found some stuff, and this was even in, like, a podcast I was watching the other day, around AI and relationships, right? So you've got these AI relationship bots, and you've got, you know, just the state right now of, like, to talk generationally, there's a section of the population, and I don't know if it's global, but it's certainly within the United States, where people haven't had, like, their first kiss. They haven't had any form of, like, a real human kind of intimate relationship in their mid-20s, some of them going into their 30s and things like that. And some of them are freaked out. They're kind of like, you know, one that gives them the, like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Some of them are like, I'm too scared. And some of them, like, it's just this massive, huge disconnect between what I would have taken as for granted as a normal human experience, right? Like, you know, I ended up having a girlfriend in my senior year of high school, and that's when I, you know, experienced things. And then, yeah, just to think about how that has moved, that time has moved further out for these individuals. And some of them, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not blaming it or shaming it. It's just an interesting reality for this generation. Like, it is a real thing. And so there's this real desire, in a way, to connect with an artificial, like, representation of a human, because they're like, well, if we can program these things to be empathetic and all loving and, like, you know, basically to be that thing that we would like to have in a relationship, it really raises a lot of questions. It raises the question of self-development, because the thing with relationships is they do reflect things back to you to learn how to grow. So there's certainly people talking about that, be like, man, if we go down this path, how are we ever going to grow? And then there's the question of just sex. You've got Google, one of the main guys from Google, I forget his name. Anyway, he's written a book, The Path to Happy, maybe? I can't remember. But he talks about this, about creating these artificial synthetic experiences, right? To create these relationship robots where, like, even sexually, you won't need a human. And I'm like, man, that's messed up, because, like, one, I can connect with this in a way. Having been in the relationship that I was in with Reese, and being in a conscious relationship, and having been married 2 times, I know the amount of effort that it takes to be in a conscious relationship. And it's not a small thing. Being in a relationship with some other human being is a lot of effort. It's a lot of work, right? And so it sounds really awesome in some way to be like, I don't have to deal with that. I just have something that's just gonna, like, it's gonna feel good. Like, you know what I mean? Not just sexually, but just, like, emotionally and empathetically and just supportingly. Like, I understand the draw to that. And at the same time, I'm like, that is a really bad fucking idea, because that's just another way to go back to the whole idea of population control. Like, you've got a whole section of you've got a generation that already is protracted out in their experience of a genuine human relationship, and then you get them connected to something that isn't even human and that can reproduce with them. It's like a silent way to reduce the population, because at some point, if these individuals are not actually reproducing and they're getting their emotional and physical needs met by a machine, the human population will naturally decline. You know what I mean? It will naturally decline. And so that's fucked up. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like, it's understandable. I'm not blaming anybody for wanting to connect that way. I have compassion and empathy for that type of connection, and understand why people would choose that. And at the same time, as a species, it seems like a really dangerous thing. And we've got people that are absolutely promoting this. Oh, it's a great idea. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think it's a good idea. And so we are definitely in some crazy times, man. Crazy times. I'm just reading your thing here. Right. Yes, that's right. And that movie, I forget, what is the name of that? Is it Simone? Is it yeah, I think, right? I think that might be the movie you're talking about. I never saw it, but I think that's the name of it. Yeah, but definitely that idea. And it's, I don't know, man. We're headed towards replacing humans in a lot of ways, and it's happening extremely fast. And it also makes me wonder too, like, with the timing of everything, with how AI came out. Really, generative AI really kicked off about a year ago. I mean, it's been in the works, but, like, Midjourney came out a little bit before ChatGPT. So creating images the way that we were able to create, that was a big deal. And then ChatGPT came out 2 or 3 months later, and then it's been fucking blown up ever since then. And so the pace in which things have been developed is incredibly fast and is not slowing down. And it's just also interesting, the timing, because it's like, okay, well, and then we've got aliens. So we've got, like, AI, we've got aliens, and it's kind of like, what are these are really giant distractions in a way. And it's like, what's going on in the background? And then we've got the stuff in Hollywood, this stuff that's coming out. I want to just say this too. There was a guy, part of the reason I'm really interested in language is, back when I was researching stuff, there was a guy named Cliff High, CLIF, and then High, 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 yeah, okay, sorry. And he had what was called the WebBot project, right? And he would produce what was called, originally it was called the Alta reports, but then he changed the name to the Shape of Things to Come. And he used to be he was an ex-Microsoft employee, and what he did, his premise was really super cool. I really loved it. That's why I paid attention to this guy. I would buy his reports and I would read them, and they were just really interesting. So his whole premise is that we're all on some level psychic, right? We all have a connection to everything, and we all have varying levels of being psychic, and the way that our psychicness would come out, the way that the connection to everything would kind of come out through humans would be through our language. And so what he did is he took like the Oxford English Dictionary, which is like 150,000 words, right? And he assigned weights. This is basically like ChatGPT before ChatGPT in a way. It just wasn't generative language. But what he did is he took all of the words and gave them weights and predictive weights, like time in the future kind of weights, and other like emotional weights and things like this. And he wrote web crawlers, because back when this was going on, text was still the main form of communication on the internet, like comments and posting in forums and like, you know, this kind of a thing. YouTube wasn't a big deal as it is now, and we didn't have Instagram, we didn't have TikTok and all those kind of things. So video content really wasn't as prevalent. Text was the largest way that we were communicating still then. So he wrote these web crawlers, and what he would do is just scrape all of these different sites, all of these different social, like just random, like all sorts of different things, like gardening forums and like automotive forums and like whatever, wherever people were talking. And he would find words that were out of context for the site, right, basically. So say like on a gardening forum, there's somebody that's talking and they used a word that seems like, well, that's kind of odd to, like, this word's a little weird. It's not a standard word to be used in the context of gardening. So why is that word appearing, right? And then what he would do is detect those words out of context of all of these different forums and whatever, and then he would pull, the sentences, like a couple sentences before and after, and have that sent back to his servers. And then basically from that, he would generate, because he assigned like predictive, like time weights to these words. This is how he would generate his shape of things to come reports, which were predictive reports about things that were going to be happening in the future. And I'm telling you what, man, the stuff around, like, his timing wasn't always right. The things that he talked about, though, a lot of it has like happened. And I'm telling you, the stuff right now going on with the writers and the actors and the stuff that's coming out, that's a huge part of it. And that is part of the linchpin of a much bigger kind of release. There's just so much energy in so many different things. And I believe that the generation that's, like I said, the millennials and younger are really starting to feel that pressure, and they're really connected to that. And we've got people now that were operating within that sphere of influence, and they're deciding to start to talk about this in like a real way. That was totally in those reports. And just to go back to like my oldest son, and when I gave him that book, Behold the Pale Horse, like there was stuff it was over his head when I first gave it to him, and he didn't read it all at once when I first gave it to him, but over the years he's gone back and he's revisited it and he's pretty much read it, and he's like, man, he's like, you've been talking about this like ever since I can remember. He's like, this is all making a lot of sense. And so, and that's happening right now with that generation and younger, like the millennials and younger. And so this is the kind of thing where like, I just don't believe, and this is like a global thing, I believe, I just don't think it's going to be something that can maintain itself. I think we're going to experience a really big shift, and I don't know what it's going to look like. It's really interesting. So I'm just reading here. Yeah, just the whole relationship part. Right, and the words here, like want, is out of like lack. I work on that one too. I say that sometimes. I'm like, okay, and that's why I tried to, just to give that as an example, instead of saying want, I work on saying like that. I work and I say I'm working on, or I'm working towards, instead of saying like I want this, like I'm working towards, this kind of a thing, or instead of like need, that type of thing. But yes, exactly that. I'm totally with you, Mac, as far as want, need, desire. Those words, I'm with you. I'm with you. So it's a lot of interesting stuff. And then last thing that I'll just kind of mention, because I found this came up to John Ramirez, like an ex-CIA agent, or I forget what his role was, but you can look him up. He's definitely vetted as far as being in the intelligence community, and just running into how the human hybrids, right? Like how, and I spoke about this probably in like a number of videos ago, where I just kind of joked. I just kind of was like, I made mention of like, there's some theories out there that our species was designed as a slave race, and there's some things out there that can really support that. You got people like John Ramirez, and you've got, stuff that ties in with these things that are coming out around like aliens that are here, or like whatever the government is talking about. There's just some real interesting stuff about our DNA, and this is part of the stuff that like Ridley Scott, to go back to Hollywood and like what they have told us and things like that. So Ridley Scott talks about, not directly, but it is something that is absolutely part of the storyline in Aliens, right? I mean, it's the whole plot of Prometheus and Alien Covenant, like the engineers and how they designed us. And if you look at the original script of Prometheus, there's some really interesting stuff that didn't make it into the theatrical release of that film, because there's a scene where Dr. Shaw and Wayland, who funds the whole trip of going out and finding the engineers, they talk to one of the engineers, and that's of course one of the questions: why did you create us? Like what's going on? And so the idea, like I said, there's always an element of truth in these things that seem either like fantasy or fairy tale or whatever. And so whatever John Ramirez is talking about human hybrids, and I believe too that would explain when I talk about like there's always a section of us that wants to dominate the other. And I think that would help explain that type of discrimination. If there's legitimately some of us that are a little bit different than the others, you know what I mean? And I think there's just a whole bunch of information, and this was talked about in the Shape of Things to Come reports as well. I think there's just a whole bunch of things, information that's going to be coming out, and it goes into what's going to happen. Like the people that have created these power structures, what is their response going to be to information coming out? And what are we going to experience? Like what may come in the sky? What's the next narrative? What's the next major event that's going to transpire that really impacts the globe? Because this is no longer just one country. This is going to be a global phenomenon. And again, I just feel like Michael Jackson with the popcorn. I don't know. I'm just kind of putting out there what I've run into, and it just really ties into everything that I ran into a long time ago. Just super interesting about how it's coming all back up. And I have no idea what my role is other than just communicating, and we'll just see what happens, man. We'll just see what happens. All right, I've been talking for a while. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and appreciate you guys being here and giving me some time and space. I love you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.